friends, I'm Victoria from the Academy of Conscious Creators, and I want to welcome you to the Academy's first Virtual Freedom Summit. And we're featuring inspiring stories of greatness, wisdom, and empowerment. So let's get started. Whilst we all have different experiences in life, the trend has been to follow the crowd. Going against the grain tends to result in criticism and judgment. Yet whatever you choose to do, others will have their opinion anyway. At some point, though, you will likely be confronted with the dilemma to choose between a life satisfying social norms or your own lifestyle free from social pressure. Choosing the safer path to fit in obviously has its benefits, yet finding the courage and strength to walk your own path can offer us the freedom to discover who we truly are. And so to tell us more about this is my guest today, Elodie Lod. And Elodie she resides in France and she works with energy and frequency. And from a very young age, she sensed that there was another reality. And this took her on a journey of her own personal self-discovery. And as she explored her own personal story and learned to reconnect with her body, she discovered that her sensitivity to the world around her was a gift that she could offer others. So welcome, Elodie.
Thank you, Victoria.
It's good to have you here. I'm excited about our conversation because what I love learning about you, and possibly one of the reasons I feel I resonate so well with you, is that from a young age, it felt natural to you to deviate from what was expected of you. So I'm curious, can you share more about how this impacted your early life experiences?
Yeah, well, it, I didn't know until later that, I don't know if I felt like I was deviating as such. I just had a sense. I've got a memory when I was, I grew up without TV, so no TV at home with my parents, but I would see TV when I would go to my grandparents, for example. And I just have this memory when I was looking at the TV, it just seems something a little bit odd. And also I remember watching the news once and thinking, this is like a film. This is like a script. This is not real.
Mm,
So it's just like little moments like this uh, for me. And yet I didn't have a sense of something different until, for example, at school when kids would ask me, so what did you watch or what did you do? And for me, even that's time about TV, it was not in my timeline, so to speak, with my parents or at home. So for me, that time was filled by other elements that I sometimes couldn't even speak because there was no comparison, or that was not taken. But for other people, that would look already kind of a bit odd, not to be into, not having that into their world, not even having a TV into their world. So maybe that's one element that I could bring as a memory of a difference, um, which I didn't have a sense on my own. For me, there was nothing bizarre, let's say, but when confronting, so to speak, with other people, that would bring up a sense of difference just
mm.
just by that.
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned obviously this started to be more visible to you when you were in school. And of course, a lot of our social conditioning happens, of course, during our schooling. And of course, many of us might even recall a time, perhaps as we got a bit older, maybe in our teens or something, when we were felt rebellious against these social constraints because any kind of constraint makes us feel like we're kind of being held back from something. There's something out there that we're not aware of that's maybe better. And also, holding us back from having the freedom to choose how we want to live our lives. And so sometimes we might feel a bit powerless if there's too many constraints put on us. And I'm curious, what was your experience as you went through the school system?
Um, well, the school system as such, I would say I have more the memory of the school grounds as interaction with others. And one aspect was that there was a lot of kids who were making reference to TV, which I didn't have that, but also playing around whatever they had seen on TV. So I couldn't partake into that either. Or it's just there was no invitation in the partake in it, because again it was like their sense of reality around a specific show that they were reproducing in together, but I didn't have the script. Talking about script, for them, they had the script to follow,
Right.
and there was also interaction, boys and girls, and that sort of age. And for some reason, I just it's like seeing through the dynamic or the mechanism of what's happening at that age, and I just didn't feel part of it. There was a sense of outsider, and yet on my own I didn't have that sense, but in relation to others, that's when I would feel the awkwardness of um, being part of a group or part of other people. But like for me, yeah, it would if I was bringing the word of comparison, in comparison, I would it's the comparison or the interaction with other which would lead me to feel different sometimes, or feel like not belonging or inadequate, or
Right.
um yes.
Yeah, okay, I understand. So this had quite an impact, I imagine, on your well-being, and then how did that kind of play out as you grew and grew up and went up the classes in school?
um well, I feel like for me it was um there was maybe the expression in the like the rebellion or something, and of course they're gonna say we're teenagers, and but for me I felt like it was a sense of um, choosing to just stay in my place, and at the same time really realizing that anything I might do different, I'm just thinking maybe at high school I would read a book or something, and I had comment of being antisocial, or not wanting to be part, or not taking part. When people would go like on break, they would go to the cafe next door and socialize, and maybe there was a part of me who was not used to that. So I'm not saying one or the other, but for me I was happy to read my book, and yet from the external again it was receiving that comment of you know to be called antisocial was quite strong, because I inside me I wanted friends as well. I wanted to connect, um and the aspects of that, and then because maybe also of I did theater at school as well, so that was also considered something out, and yet for me I never saw it out, but I could see how it was played by some people either taking those classes. So it was interesting that for me there was not a sense of wanting to be different or wanting to express freedom,
Right.
and yet by the choices I was making it looked like I was going against a grain, like you mentioned in the
Yeah.
introduction, when
Yeah.
for
But
me
it was
it was
natural.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. So as you were starting to recognize this and and maybe you didn't, as you're saying, when you were going through it, you didn't really have the awareness that this was what was sort of happening. But as you were going through this, what did you start to recognize each time you kind of checked in with your own individuality and your own well-being, and how that then impacted everyone else? Because, of course, a lot of us are sort of taught to maybe even put others' needs first, and then that starts, then we start to lose a sense of identity if we even had one in the first place. Is that making sense?
Yeah, in response to that, I feel well, even though I wanted to feel part of, there was a natural guidance maybe, and I wouldn't use that back then, but which would take me somewhere else. So at some point as well, working, or at least the job I was doing while studying, I was offered to stay on, and for me, I didn't feel I wanted to. Also, it was a great opportunity, probably. Or some of the people said, well, because it all started as a work experience, and they consider keeping me on, and I took my bag and I just went went abroad, when
Okay.
actually it probably would have looked like the natural evolution of, like, well, there was a studying, and there was this job opportunity, which, yeah, in for other people it looked great, and even now talking about it, it was great. It could have been great for me as well. It didn't feel like staying there, because it just suddenly felt like a structure that I didn't feel like I was going to fit in, or I had the experience that was meant for me there, but it was not supposed to be in the long term as seen and offered as it was. Maybe not then, maybe now, maybe, but not then.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm kind of hearing again that maybe unconsciously you kind of had this sort of like, oh, if I stay here, then I'm, I'm being constrained in some ways. And like you mentioned, the structure that sort of forced you away from that model that was. And as you said, you go to school, and then this is what happens next, and then this is what happens next. The way that we're led to think that this is how we map out the perfect life, if you want to call it that. And so also what I'm hearing is that, you know depending on maybe our gender, and like you say, where you grew up, what our upbringing was like, what our perhaps economic situation is like, that also has a role in setting out, well, what is possible for you or for us in life. What would you say about that, how these labels affect our ability to even view who we are?
Yes, to find out what we want in those offers or in those choices, because if it's being shown as the opportunity, the life opportunity. I've heard that as well for some things which have come my way. This is the life opportunity. You'll never have that again.
Right.
And I mean, at this time of life, it's not like with the in 16th century or 17th century, when maybe women back then, there was a different degree. So to hear that, it was I I was having also information of hearing some people wanting me to take this because they hadn't themselves had the opportunity of that in their life,
Mm.
or they had opportunity that they didn't take, and so there was somewhat projecting their own desire onto me at that moment, um, which when I heard it, for me it was a way to, because it was from family members, it was a way to ask them question and understand more about their own journey. So I didn't feel I was um, pushing away that projection, which could have been like feeling like, a bit like parents say, yeah, take those classes, because I didn't have the opportunity to go to ballet or to whatever. And for me, there it was the opportunity to actually learn more about my family, or where I was coming from, or what my aunt or my grandmother, their journey a little bit more. In those moments of, they were almost more excited than I was for an opportunity which was coming my way. So that was also a way to question and dig a little bit more, and link up to my roots without being the follower of the same, of that same lineage, maybe, or
Mm.
what dream hadn't been fulfilled, that I would have to, because um what, to please their expectation. And I'm not saying that they would, for them it was a dream, and for me it wasn't. um
Yeah. And you
yeah.
hear that, you see that a lot in the world, parents trying to live out their dreams through their children because it was unfulfilled when they were young, right? And and maybe also hearing a little bit of this, if we look back through our ancestry and what, like you said, was possible for women, perhaps there was a bit of a fear there of this routine, and perhaps even we could describe it as maybe a bit of a mundane existence. Would you say that that might have been true?
Yes, I had those thoughts, I don't know if I want the family and the children and the routine. I know that routine was quite a confronting word for me. It's a word that I was feeling uneasy around. Just it was, yeah, coming back to freedom for me. It was a constrict to whatever, or everything I could explore or differently. Um,
Yeah.
and again, I like to say at that time, because I'm not saying that now. It's a different perspective. But in between, I've had my journey of exploring, of making different choices, of living many places as well, or jobs as well. As at some point it was a natural ending, and I could have stayed, but it just felt not. And that doesn't mean that I knew where I was going next, or what
Mm.
work I was going to take on, but it felt true for me to just to leave. And maybe also because I had myself to think about. So for other situation, it might be different. People who've got families, or all this. So for me, ultimately, it's finding out what's true for oneself without the constriction of around. But what looks for one, freedom looks different from for one person to another. As long as I'm not, walking onto someone else's freedom, then that's okay. We can live next to each other in that way, and
Mm.
respect each other's choices as well.
Yeah, I love that. And so then that makes me think, because we do see this in the world, people fighting against other people's views and opinions. And there isn't really much respect or freedom to have your own, view and opinion, and that be okay. So what would you say if when we identify so strongly with these different labels that we've attached to as we've grown up, and how that maybe on one hand offers us a sense of security, but then on the other hand, if someone else's label is seen as having maybe more authority, it can, that person might feel threatened. What would you say on that?
What comes up is keep questioning, keep asking, and checking in with yourself if that feels what one wants to do. Well, if does is it what I want to do now? Is it where I want to go now? Is it who I want to be with? Because it's in everything. Relationship is not just with one person, a group.
Right.
It's with life and with oneself first. So it's finding the courage as well to ask, what does it look for me? What does freedom looks for me? And in this moment, because it can evolve, and that's
Yeah.
the thing that you were mentioning, being in labels or boxes. I mean, I've received many labels as well, been, antisocial, EP, all the thing, only because it looked different from maybe a norm or a form.
Mm.
But they could be even another form of me, even looking freer, even looking more extreme in that expression of freedom. People walking naked across a fire at a festival, or things like this. Everything I've seen, and it's just, um, for me, it just comes back. Do I want to be that person? Do I want to express my freedom like this? do I? Because it's also recognizing what feels true for oneself and not falling into a pattern or an identity or a label, and seeing that that can evolve. It's not one person for a whole life. It's many possibilities. On in this as well, it's many people that we can be. You think about an actor, they can have all these different people
Yeah.
in one's life. We can be different people as well, as long as we keep following what feels true for our heart and our life, and exploring all this, however that looks like.
Yeah, and I love what you've just said. I think that's so important, and yeah, good reminder or insight for people to consider each time they're interacting with others on their path. And so, like, if we looked at your life, what would you say was kind of the biggest transformation, like the biggest experience that you had that led to this transformation on your journey so far?
Oh, um, there's been many different ones.
Okay.
I would say it has been mainly through relating, even though the starting of my life was quite a long path, and it remains. Um, Not so many people around, not so many connections. Um, but through relationship and through relating, or through interaction with the world. um I'd say a more recent one for me has been the death of my mother, because that's also been a massive, heartbreak, but also bringing me into a new identity or a new
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
um
I understand.
so those moments, yeah, many transition in my life through work as well, but I've changed so many work. um and it keeps moving every day. I mean, sometimes I wake up and it's like, yeah, it's the obvious. It's that obvious sense I'm not the same as yesterday. And it's every day, every moment is a new transition, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of that relationship with oneself as well, recognizing those moments of difference, and either keep going with them, or saying, well, actually, am I not ready for that much expansion or transformation as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's so, um, yeah, when you look at it in that way, sometimes we kind of get locked into this identity, and then we play that out for our entire life without changing at all. And
Mm.
often that identity wasn't even one that we were choosing. It was the labels that other people put on us that shape this identity that we then play out. And to think that if we get to the end or whatever that looks like and we haven't changed, then in some ways that's more, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but I suppose limited. Like, we've not really realized our true potential. And of course it tells me that a lot of us do identify with just our thoughts, our mind, and what that tells us who we are. And often we're judging ourselves on our appearance and what is possible for us, so we start identifying just as the mind and the body. So what yeah how would you weave in, because obviously you've really connected to your spiritual essence and also your body, so you're bringing the mind, body, spirit essentially, to navigate through life and shifting and changing as it feels fit. So, what would you say that opens up for our potential? Sorry, it's a bit of a waffly way of, of getting
No,
to the point.
what came to me as well, and I'm just coming back when you said, what's the biggest transformation? I mean, transformation, I think, as well, can sound like enormous, but I feel like also, and I'm not a mother, but like someone who become a mother, and even coming back to, yeah, maybe what some people would look like constrict, like marriage and all, but it's not. it's all those moments are moments of transformation as well, and how we're gonna enter into those new spaces, whether they stay put, like they're in the same place, in the same structure, in the same family.
Mm.
How do we evolve within that when we discover that we've changed a little bit? And it's yeah, it's a dance as well with oneself and with others. And yeah, transformation can be suddenly a massive, like, okay, I'm leaving everything. I mean, I've moved a lot, I've changed a lot of places as well. And at times it was still on the reaction side of it, because I didn't know that I could find freedom just by being as well quite happy with myself in one place.
Right.
Or I just felt like I needed to leave because I couldn't stand something anymore around me, and energetically was too much.
Mm-hmm.
um but in that sense of, like, I'm trying to get back to your question. It's the ability as well to see that sometimes transformation is that big weekend or that big moment away, and it doesn't mean that we just have to drop everything of our life to go and live whatever. It's recognizing it in oneself, and whether we go back to the old way, because I think many people, even if they say they're not conscious, deep down they know when there's something which wants to change or which has changed. Is
Mm-hmm.
whether having maybe the courage, and I really mean that with love, because it's not always easy to completely shift or completely um, move away from something that we've known so well and which feels comfortable. I've been there as well. It's like sometimes taking me a long time to leave, for example, a relationship. And I feel is
Yeah.
that as well. And ultimately, that freedom within oneself, that freedom with oneself, that's where it starts really, like when you feel you can be with everything which is happening, and you still alive and you're still breathing, even if it's a massive, it might feel like a massive chaos within or with the external. And ultimately, that's where, for me, like, freedom has become much more obvious as well. It's the ability and the acceptance of everything, whatever happens, and still recognizing that I'm breathing despite
Yeah.
whatever is happening. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's some real wisdom there. And, I'm reminded actually of, a few years ago, there was a lot of chaos happening in my life. Friendships were changing, job was uncertain, um, relationships were not working out. And I made a sudden decision. I was working in Australia at the time, and I made a sudden decision that actually I'll just stay here. I'm not going to go back to the UK, and hadn't planned for that or prepared for that. But it was like, I remember thinking to myself, like, open my suitcase, but my problems were still there, because, like you were saying, until you can find that inner freedom within you, you're kind of just running from situations that maybe make you feel uncomfortable, and like you were saying, learning how to respond to to just being present with who you are and in your body, no matter what's going on around you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And so would you say that what happened that when you had to kind of turn within and look at the resistance that maybe you were running, recognizing you were also on that sort of escapism, perhaps?
Yes. Well, it was interesting to realize that after moving a lot, like, and for me was a form of what which looked like freedom, and in the form of expression, that where I was at the time, and then arriving in a city and realizing that over the years I had maybe 15 different addresses of maybe staying in that place, like, for the same number of years. So it was still happening, but I was able to still do it in a place which was familiar. So I was gonna I stood still even if there was moments, okay, this is not the home I want anymore. And that was becoming a more of a conscious choice as well to leave. That in terms of there was a container in itself in terms of the city. So, because you bump into the same people or you bump like so this I didn't have a way to escape, so to speak, anymore. So it was just sitting with that and sitting with myself in a place which led me to realize that actually I I have everything, and that freedom is ultimately really like the one that I can give to myself, the peace of mind, the serenity, or even if it's about like a complete, like really raging moment, giving myself all form of expression that I need in one moment of time because it wants to be heard, it wants to be expressed, and recognizing that and giving that to myself, acknowledging myself in this moment and witnessing what's happening and giving it as much love as I can as well, because all at once it's being expressed and being seen. And in that moment, I free myself as well because I am with it completely.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, maybe you want to just share a little bit more about, so for the audience to connect to, where would they start if they wanted to go into this self-inquiry? Because, a lot of the times we don't want to go there. It's like, oh, it's a bit scary. I'll go and put the telly on or distract myself with something, or yeah, we just do anything that we can to avoid really having to look within and see what's going on inside of us. So what would you like to share? To help people face themselves, I guess.
Yeah, well, I had this conversation this weekend with someone I was helping, and it's that moment if you recognize, even if you recognize that you're feeling something and you want to go to the TV, do it knowing that you choose to go to the TV
Mm,
because there's something scratching within, and it's okay. That's the choice you make, rather than actually being there with what's scratching or giving it a voice or giving it a space. So little by little, at some point, going to the TV or going to whatever we could call everything. I mean, but chocolate, alcohol, whatever, distraction. Yeah, let's put the word distraction.
yeah.
At some point, this almost distraction doesn't become an option anymore because there's the beauty of actually what wants to be heard and what wants to be said, and this again, it's like nurturing that relation with oneself, and that for me, it has become sometimes, yeah, it's just it replaced distraction because it's almost like I don't have the option anymore, even if I will at time. Yeah, I don't want to look into that, or I don't want to give attention to that, but it comes back, and at
Right.
the moment I'm ready, I know that I will give it the space and the love and the information and what I need to hear. It doesn't have to be traumatic or dramatic either. It's like it's just learning to listen to the inside more than to the outside as well,
Yeah.
and that it just becomes a natural organical dance. It's just learning the little steps to get there, but that connection with oneself and in that moment, because it just expands the sense of freedom, and then that freedom with others and with the world outside just opens up such a beauty, even in the simplicity. It doesn't have to be anything, it doesn't have to create anything enormous,
Mm,
but it creates that space at least, and that space is one taking fully um it's life in one's hand, actually. I say it, just like the full
Yeah.
presence coming to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I guess as we come to the end of our time together, I'm really just struck by how how we opened the conversation around, when we are trying to find our own way and our own identity, we can often be met with this sort of judgment and criticism from external forces. And then also how you sort of said to honor how we're feeling with love and compassion, because until we can meet ourselves in that space, often we have our own judgments and criticisms of how we are viewing our thoughts or our behaviors. And when we can really meet ourselves with that presence that you were talking about, it does expand. It gives us that sense of freedom, inner peace, and a more a different way of showing up in the world and with others. We're feeling much more connected to ourselves in doing so.
Yes. And it's seeing as well when something comes our way and it's not true, or whatever was seen before as constriction as well. Doesn't have to be, because within, or it's that doesn't exist anymore. So it's not saying that suddenly all constriction are gone in the external particularly, but it's how I meet it,
Yeah.
and how suddenly, what before someone would say, and I would feel something like it's labeling me, or it's putting me in a box. So it's stopping my freedom. That's there. I have to give them the validation. It's by giving them the validation that they take my freedom away on some level. I mean, not that they, anyone takes anything.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that. But when you were talking about judgment or all this, I mean, it's everywhere if one lets it happen. The
Yeah.
the pushing back to what we truly ultimately, freedom is not something, freedom is, and within, and we are. So it's just connecting to that as well, that bigger, because it's a word as well which has got so, even today I was talking about it. It's like, yeah, also in philosophy, and coming from the French as well. So and I was like, yeah, that's not that's not the idea. The idea is just, it's an energy much bigger than any word can. And
Yeah.
it's about connecting to this, because yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've talked in the past about the freedom for or the freedom from, and as you were saying, it just is, and that's another level of that freedom, and it's naturally inherent within us, and the more we start to tap into who we are, we're able to make choices that either serve us, well, hopefully serve us, and choose the options that aren't really going to serve us, without any resistance or judgment or criticism, because we are coming from that space of just being open and free.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
There's no pushback. It's
That's right.
it yeah, it is. It's like, there's, at that moment there's no other option, but it's not, yeah, it's not pushback. It's That's it.
Yeah, nice. Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for sharing today. I think there's a lot of takeaways that people can mull over from listening to this conversation. And just to close, it'd be really great if you would maybe share a little bit more about how people can find out more about you and connect with you. And then I believe you've
uh,
also got a little gift that you would like to offer our listeners, our viewers as well.
yes, so there'll be a link to a page where people can get in touch if they, if whatever reason. So there's a way to connect, yeah, email or various ways. And yeah, the gift is an invitation of a few days to explore, um, an intention, and it could be connecting to freedom or connecting to oneself through the elements, so the fire, the water, one element at a time, over 4-5 days. Yeah.
I love that. Exciting. All right. Well, I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
have plenty of people signing up for that opportunity. Thank you, Elodie.
Thank you. Thank you,
Th-
Victoria.
Thank you for being with me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Probably went over a bit longer than we were expected, but it felt like it was a really deep and insightful chat. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've been speaking with Elodie Lod, and Elodie supports and guides others by using her unique sensitivity to tap into energy fields. So you can find out more by connecting with her, as she said. And if you're looking for a platform where you can access support on your journey to personal freedom, come join us. I hope you'll explore, have fun, and connect with others. And you can find out more at www.wearetac.com. That's weartacc.com. The Academy of Conscious Creators, empowering you to create a new story of your life. Thanks for watching.